As a video game collector, I have seen my hobby grow vastly over the past few years, with new people jumping in and prices skyrocketing. In fact, it can be pretty intimidating to even get into the retro game market nowadays. But as a self-proclaimed retro game expert, I'm going to be going over a small list of some of my favorite NES games that won't end up breaking your video game collecting budget. Now, prices fluctuate on a regular basis, so what it is now may not be what it is when you're seeing this video, and of course these are based on internet prices, Amazon, eBay, and they aren't the best ways to always go about getting your collecting, and I always suggest going after yard sales and flea markets, but either way, these are the top 10 NES games that you can get still for under $11. Iron Sword Wizards and Warriors 2, the first of the Wizards and Warriors games I ever actually played as a kid, is easily my favorite of the bunch. One of the main reasons, of course, is that awesome, amazing opening song from David Wise. All the music's fantastic in Iron Sword, but that opening is almost worth the price of admission as it is. Iron Sword was a pretty big deal when it came out, with a commercial that ended up airing on television that can definitely be looked at and laughed at nowadays, as well as just having the model Fabio on the cover, which always will stand out as just one of the oddities of the NES box art library. The action in Iron Sword definitely takes a bit to get used to and has a unique overall feel to it, running into enemies and attacking them more so than just being able to fully swipe out at them. But with overall cool level designs and interesting enemies and characters along the way, Iron Sword may not be the best action game on the NES, but it's definitely one of the better ones that you can get still for under $11. The granddaddy of all JRPGs. What can truly be said about Dragon Warrior other than, yeah, maybe it doesn't stand the test of time as a brilliant JRPG, but it was the one that started the foundation, and thankfully is one of the few JRPGs on the NES that can still be gotten for a relatively low price. Most of this is due to the highly successful Nintendo Power subscription, which allowed people to actually get a free copy of Dragon Warrior along with a Dragon Warrior strategy guide, which I honestly wish I had myself still today. The mechanics and action and a lot of grind-heavy overall gameplay makes Dragon Warrior not age as well as some of the other JRPGs on the NES, but it is the one that started it all, and it can still be gotten for a relatively low price. I guess we can thank Nintendo Power for definitely bringing not only Dragon Warrior to the attention of many North American gamers, but heck, also giving us our first taste for free of that JRPG goodness. When it comes to the NES, one of my favorite developers of all time was Sunsoft. Though they didn't always have the absolute best quality games, they always put some great effort not only in the music, but also especially when it came to the action department. And Blaster Master is one of the best examples, having multiple modes of play of an overworld where you're actually traveling along in your tank, the Sophia III. You can jump out and run around and fire at enemies in order to enter into dungeons, and then taking a top-down dungeon exploring presentation like the original Legend of Zelda, except you're blasting through baddies and powering up your weapon and then taking on epic giant bosses with a kick-ass soundtrack behind you. Blaster Master is definitely challenging, but it's one of my all-time favorite games on the NES. One of the most unknown titles probably on this list, The Magic of Scheherazade, is a hidden gem that I don't think a lot of people even now have had the opportunity to truly jump into. Mixing up multiple different styles of gameplay, similar to a turn-based RPG, along with the action styling of the original Legend of Zelda, having a unique Arabian theme that wasn't seen all that much, especially on the NES, with some great music, a time-traveling gimmick, and even mini-games thrown into the mix. Magic of Scheherazade combines so many different elements, but it does so very well, and is definitely one of the most underrated games that is still not so popular from the NES era. While they may have fallen nowadays, Konami was one of the kings of the NES era. Castlevania Contra, And one of my favorite action games, Jackal. This was an arcade game ported over to the NES with some minor changes that overall makes it superior, in my opinion, to its arcade version. Being able to play one player or two players, saving POW prisoners, gaining some power-ups, and blasting through army man after army man, taking out helicopters, other tanks, and other big enemies along the way with a really awesome rocking soundtrack that go along with your adventure. Jackal is definitely one of the funnest, not only single player, but co-op games that you can still get that won't break your budget. When you think of movie license tie-in games, you're probably going to think of just poor games or the Rainbow of Doom, but there were some others on the NES that are worth noting, including the Capcom-released Willow. Based on the movie of the same name, you control Willow on an action-adventure game similar to the original Legend of Zelda, exploring towns, gaining power-ups, and going through dungeons, all with a great soundtrack that accompanies your journey. Willow is definitely one of the highlights of licensed movie games for the NES, and not only that, one of my favorite action-adventure games for the system. Action, adventure, and RPGs are all well and fine, but every once in a while you want to play something a little bit different. And The Adventures of Lolo is one of the finest examples of a puzzle-solving game you're going to find in the 8-bit system. You control Lolo, who's trying to save his girlfriend Lala from the evil Devil King, exploring the Devil King's castle. Each room you'll have to gather hearts, watching out for enemies. Certain enemies will instantly kill you if they get you in your line of sight, while other ones move around the room and you'll have to block their path so they're unable to get to you. After collecting all the hearts, the treasure chest will open and you'll be able to grab the crystal and move on to the next room. Each room presents new and interesting puzzles that you'll have to solve, and definitely is one of the best puzzle-based games on the NES. And of course it's from HAL Laboratories, who would go on to later create the Kirby as well as the Super Smash Bros. Series. While a financial failure at the time for Broderbund, Battle of Olympus was the first game I played with a Greek mythology theme. It is very similar to The Legend of Zelda 2: Adventure of Link. You control your main character battling through hordes of Greek mythology creatures such as satyrs, minotaurs, and lamias. You'll be traveling through various different areas, exploring caves and dungeons, collecting items, collecting money in order to purchase some key items here and there, and overall has one of the best adventure feels for an NES game that isn't named The Legend of Zelda. Another Capcom classic, Little Nemo the Dream Master, based on the animated film of the early 90s, as well as it too being based on the comic strip of the early 1900s. In it, you control Little Nemo, who's adventuring through Dreamland. You'll be platforming through colorful and challenging levels, using candy to befriend animals, and then using their abilities to help you advance and take out other foes who may want to try to stop your progress. With fun and creative level design, Little Nemo is quite a tough game in order to go through. Don't let the cute and colorful graphics fool you that this game is definitely going to be one of your harder NES experiences, and beating it is definitely an accomplishment. But with all the various animals that you get to join that all have unique and different abilities that they throw onto the table, Little Nemo is definitely a very fun and joyful game, especially to enjoy nowadays when you probably have better retro skills to be able to complete it a little bit more so than you were able to when you were younger. Before we make it to number 1 though, some honorable mentions. First up, Legacy of the Wizard. This game based on the Dragon Slayer series in Japan, Legacy of the Wizard has you controlling a family through a giant labyrinth, with each area of the labyrinth being better to be taken on by a different family member. While extremely cryptic and hard to figure out when I was a child, getting a map and guide nowadays makes Legacy of the Wizard a very fun and action-packed adventure through the underground layer beneath the family's house. One of the saved video games in North America, Super Mario Bros., bundled with either Duck Hunt or with Duck Hunt and World Track Meet, can still be gotten for a relatively low price. If for some reason you don't already have this one or both different types of compilation in your collection, Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, and World Track Meet is definitely a nice little addition to any NES collection. Lastly, a game that I absolutely adore, but many don't share that same sentiment, The Adventures of Bayou Billy from Konami combines action, driving, and even zapper levels to make an overall unique game. It does have some awesome music to go along with your adventure, especially if you're able to make it past that first opening stage. And then if you're able to make it past the driving levels, you truly are good at the classic retro era of video games. The Japanese version, Mad City, which is extremely easy in comparison to the original North American release for Bayou Billy, can be still gotten for around $14, which I do recommend if you have the ability to play Famicom imports. Definitely check out Mad City, as it may give you a better appreciation for what they were trying with The Adventures of Bayou Billy here in North America, but ended up falling flat just due to the overall difficulty of the game. Those who know me may not see this as much of a shock, but Star Tropics is one of my absolute favorite games of all time, let alone on the NES. The adventures of Mike Jones through the Sea Islands trying to find his uncle, traveling through all these different Caribbean-style islands, finding various villages and town people to interact with, exploring some very complicated and challenging dungeons and battling some big bosses, even getting involved with aliens by the time you get to the end of it. Star Tropics has a grid-like action system for its dungeon exploration, which seems jarring at first, but once you get the controls down, you quickly realize that all the designs of the dungeons and puzzle solving definitely complement the overall control scheme of Star Tropics. The sequel, Zoda's Revenge, can also be gotten for a relatively low price thankfully nowadays, though I will always prefer the original Star Tropics. Either one of these games is a great addition to any NES collector's library. So there you have it, 10 NES games that can still be gotten without breaking your budget. And in fact, there's actually quite a few more that are still under $10, though of course may be a little bit more hit or miss than the games I mentioned in this video. If you know what the current retro prices are nowadays, what are some of your favorite NES games that I didn't cover that you can still be gotten for a halfway decent price? If you enjoyed this, let me know down below if there's any other countdowns for other systems that you may be interested in or other topics you would love me to cover. But anyway guys, that will wrap up this top 10 video. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.